Okay, well, welcome, Jeannie, and thank you for joining us today for the theme launch of the Canadian National March for Life. From one organizer to another, I'm sure you are ready for a vacation after such a successful march. I know how it feels, but on this end, we're just ramping up, so we're just doing all that work. I wasn't able to attend the march this year in Washington, but I caught some of the coverage and it was really great. The amount of people who march just always shocks me. And the large stage and the jumbotron and the music, we are very restricted in Canada here for what we are allowed to put on the Hill. Do you have any restrictions there in the States? Are they pushing you against that?
Well, first of all, thanks, Debbie, for having me. And I'll certainly be keeping you in my prayers as you all are working towards the fulfillment of your march. We do have many restrictions. So we work really closely with the National Park Service and then the DC Police and the Capitol Police. And we start working with them a year in advance. They're usually pretty good about letting us have the stage and sound that we want, but there might be certain regulations like the sound equipment needs to be turned a certain way, or we might have to provide flooring depending on how many people are there, a certain amount of porta pots or, first aid tents, et cetera. So there are many policy hoops that we need to follow through on, but they're really quite great to work with. And this year in DC, the police presence was like it's never been before. They wanted to make sure that they were keeping us marchers safe. And I, for one, am really grateful.
Wow, that's really great. Yes, we also work with our police and the parliamentary security group, but we are very restricted to the equipment we're allowed to bring up there. So, as the president, how was your first post-Roe march? Would you say it was any different?
Oh, yes. The enthusiasm of the marchers was certainly palpable. What a monumental victory for the overturn of Roe. Of course, the March for Life began as a result of Roe, which legalized abortion in the United States through all 50 states. And so there were a lot of questions this year about, should we still continue to march? And as the staff and the board of the organization, we did some pretty deep discernment about that question and our mission and the timing and all of those kinds of things. And it was beautiful to see all of that really confirmed in the march this year. It was bigger than I've seen for probably the last 5 years, believe it or not. One of the biggest marches I've ever seen. And I wasn't necessarily expecting that. And, but I was expecting the young people and the enthusiasm, and that really, came just tremendously. And I mean, of course I'm biased, but I think we had the best speakers ever this year. But I actually really do think that. I don't just say that. I mean, they really just were so deep and profound, and had, either just really inspired words to share with the marchers or themselves just by who they were such a testimony to the inherent dignity of the human person. So I'm just beyond grateful to God and to all of the marchers after this 50th March for Life.
Wow, that is incredible. And I know you don't count anymore, but is there an estimate?
Well, you're right. So the National Park Service used to do crowd estimates, but they got out of that business when there was a lawsuit after what was called the Million Man March in Washington, D.C., and they estimated that under 1 million men attended. So we try to work with them to get a crowd count, but we don't. I mean, I could tell you it's bigger than recent years. We don't have data points yet. We typically are able to follow up with our metro system and then our bus permitting system, and then also a few different avenues. For example, some of the big events that are happening. So just from my quick look at it, and now we've got this, state march program. So I feel like we're making these guesstimates quite frequently. I thought that at least at the rally, I'd say there were a good 15,000. And at the rally, we get a smaller number, and then it's much larger for the march itself. And I know that it was, I think, just under 2 hours from the beginning marcher to the end marcher, shoulder to shoulder, passing that final point. So take that as you will. But I think it was, maybe 100,000 or so. I mean, a big, really big crowd. We typically get about 100,000. We hear some wild estimates like 500,000, a million. Those are probably a little bit exaggerated, but 100,000 every year is no small amount of people in Washington, D.C. We certainly shut down the city that day.
Wow, that is a feat. And I have to say, I was very blessed to attend in 2019. Wow, that was an incredible experience. And every year we send people from Campaign Life and from our provinces to the Washington March for Life. And so this year we sent about 40, including some staffers, 40 youth, including some staffers. We check it out. We might get or, steal some great ideas to make our march even better. And so our 40, our group of 40 had a really fabulous experience. You must be very impressed, though, with the amount of youth that I saw there on the coverage, the amount of youth that are attracted to the march and are active in the pro-life movement.
Oh, absolutely. It's probably the most positive thing every year. And the thing that people comment about more than, especially first-time marchers, more than anything else is the sheer volume of young people. So most participants in the march are under the age of 25, I'd say, and they have quite creative signs and T-shirts and hats. I mean, they're very their joy and their enthusiasm is really contagious and very inspiring to those of us who might be a few decades older.
So with the abortion debate back in the individual states, I noticed that there were several states that had their own marches. We've always encouraged marches across Canada in our different provinces because, of course, not everybody is able to travel to the capital, to Ottawa. Can you tell us, and I know you sort of alluded to this already, but can you tell us why it is still so important to gather in the nation's capital every year for the National March for Life?
Oh, absolutely. There are a few reasons for that. And I'd love to just talk a little bit more about our State March Initiative. But so with the overturn of Roe, well, okay, there's so much I want to say here. So I mentioned before that when Roe v. Wade came down in the U.S. in 1973, it legalized abortion in all 50 states. But you fast forward 50 years later, and the overturn of Roe does not make abortion illegal, or even more importantly, unthinkable in our country. What it does is it just returns the question of pro-life protections to the American people through their elected officials. But that's both at the state level and the federal level. It's not just at the state level, and there's a fair bit of confusion around that here in the US. But states do enjoy a lot more freedom than they previously had. So even like the case that went before the Supreme Court was a 15-week life protective law from Mississippi. And now they're able to enact that law, whereas prior to Roe v. Wade being overturned, that was unconstitutional. So there is a lot more freedom. But anyway, so why do we still need to keep marching in the Capitol? Well, for starters, I mean, we have many federal pieces of legislation that are coming down the pike that are really critically important. So that could be anything from appropriations battles, and included in our appropriation process every year is the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits taxpayer funding for paying for abortion. It's arguably the most impactful pro-life policy ever in the US, saving well over 2 million babies. So that's something that we'd lose right away if we stopped battling for at the federal level. But there are also even more I don't want to say more nefarious, because that would be pretty bad if we lost that, but other, bills that are concerning. So for example, right after Dobbs came down, the Senate voted on something called, sounds great, Women's Health Protection Act. Unfortunately, it's not as great as it sounds. In fact, it's really horrific. And it would have allowed abortion on demand through all stages of pregnancy and paid for by tax dollars. So it would most likely probably end up in the courts, but do away with all the good state protections that have been put into place. So legislatively, there's very much need to still march. But even more importantly is the question of changing hearts and minds. So this was our 50th March for Life. And while we never anticipated that Roe would stay on the books this long, we also didn't anticipate that we would become the largest longest running annual human rights demonstration worldwide. And sadly, the human rights abuse of abortion is still, very active in the United States. We anticipate over 700,000 abortions in the year ahead, which is so sad. And so why would you stop the human rights protest that has become so fruitful and so big, and, stop it right in the middle of the problem not being solved? So it wouldn't make any sense. So we will continue to march in January around the anniversary of Roe, and we'll continue to fight for those federal, good bills, life protective bills, but also just to work even more towards the day when abortion is unthinkable in the United States.
So we have very similar issues here. Many bills passed that look good on the surface, but are horrific.
Yeah.
And so we have to continue marching as well. So you saw our video announcing our theme, Stand Firm. What comes to your mind when you think of Stand Firm?
Oh, it's such a great theme, just in the sense that even how can I say? Okay, so to walk away from something, you lose a voice. So just to stay strong, even if you're not necessarily proactively moving in a certain direction, but just standing straight in one place, it implies perseverance, and so much bad stuff won't be able to happen because of that. You just have a picture of like someone standing there and as a barrier to nefarious things happening. So it's also very scriptural. If you look at Ephesians 6, it's all about standing firm, against the wiles of the devil. And it's true. That's what we're called to do, is to persevere in this battle by God's grace. Sometimes that will require a little bit more active participation in the battle for a culture of life. But sometimes the most important step is just to be firmly planted where you are and not move, not budge, basically, not budge. And that's what I think of when I think of stand firm.
That's exactly right. And that's where it has come from, of course, Ephesians 6:14. And we do have to stand firm with the truth, because we know we have the truth. So that's what we're doing this year, every year, and we will continue doing it as well. Yeah. As Canadians, or many Canadians across the country watching this today, and as you mentioned, you've been marching for 50 years and you persevered and persevered. Well, this will be our 26th march as well. So
congratulations. Amazing.
Thanks. Thank you. And in Canada, it's like the 10% rule with the United States. So if you have 100,000, we always hope for at least 10,000.
Wonderful.
And marching, and we've met that many times. Actually, we were up to 26,000 one year, I think, with again, just an estimate count. And so in the last couple of years, due to the situation, our numbers have gone lower, but we're really hoping to come back again this year. So do you have any final comments for us going forward? How we can stand firm to protect life? Any other further comments?
Well, I love to hear of everything happening. And of course, you really do have your battles cut out for you in Canada. We both have, we have unique battles, but I guess I'd like to just thank you, the organizers. I know how much work goes into this, and that sometimes there can be a realm of spiritual warfare as well. And to really just applaud you for continuing to stand firm all these years, and just know of our solidarity and our prayers for you.
Well, thank you. It's we have an incredible team, as I'm sure you do, because of the very many moving parts of the March for Life and our week-long events. So yes, and we also continue to pray for you, and we're always blessed when we get to go there and get to watch the footage. It's wonderful. So thank you as well. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us today, and sharing your information with the Canadian people and your hope. And we thank you too for standing firm, for protecting life from conception to natural death. Thanks so much, Jeannie.
Well, thank you.
The historic overturning of Roe v. Wade announced to the world, life will win if we stand firm. But the attack on life is far from over. In Canada, 300 babies in the womb are killed each day, increasingly by chemical means, while our Prime Minister muses about making abortion a right. Euthanasia is exploding, and soon people with mental illness could be eligible to request it to end their lives. And now, infanticide is being considered for children with severe disabilities. If there was ever a time to stand firm for life, that time is now. On May 11th, Canadians from all walks of life will come to Parliament Hill to stand firm for babies in the womb, for mothers in crisis pregnancies, for those living with a disability, for the elderly in hospitals and care homes. Life will win if we stand firm.